This video is brought to you by Brilliant. On Sunday, Turkey will go to the polls to elect its next parliament and president. While most of the recent media coverage has understandably focused on the election itself, in the background, Turkey's currency, the Lira, has been steadily declining. The central bank, which is run by an Erdogan loyalist, has been trying its hardest to prevent the Lira from falling further ahead of the election. But despite its best efforts, at time of writing, the Lira is trading at an all-time low of nearly 20 Lira per US dollar. For context, in 2021, it was trading at about 8 Lira to the dollar, and back in 2008, the Lira and dollar were nearly 1-to-1. So in this video, we're going to explain why the Lira has collapsed to an all-time low, why, unfortunately for ordinary Turkish citizens, it'll almost definitely fall even further, and why this is bad news for Erdogan's electoral prospects. So let's start off by quickly explaining why the Lira has had such a torrid few years. Now, we've done loads of videos before, so go watch them if you want to know more. But essentially, because Turkey's economy relies quite heavily on imports, Turkey's inflation rate has surged over the last couple of years. Usually, central banks hike rates to reduce inflation, but Erdogan thinks this idea is a conspiracy advanced by the so-called interest rate lobby, and considers interest rates un-Islamic in some way. Instead, the president decided to cut rates and fire any central banker who dared to disagree with him. Accordingly, the central bank has steadily cut rates from 19% in March 2021 to 8.5% today. And as orthodox economists would have predicted, the value of the Lira plummeted from about 6 Lira per dollar before the pandemic to 18 per dollar at the end of 2022, and inflation skyrocketed. Turkey's official year-on-year inflation rate reached a peak of 85.5% in October of last year, and while it's fallen to 44% in April, that would still imply prices are up 150% in the past 2 years. And unofficial estimates put the true figure far higher. Istanbul's Chamber of Commerce, for example, puts inflation at 73%, while the Inflation Research Group, a group of independent Turkish economists, put it at 105%. Anyway, you get the idea. The Lira is down and inflation is up, whatever the precise figure. Now, at the beginning of the year, it looked like the Lira had stabilised at about 18 Lira to the dollar. But in the past month or so, the Lira has fallen again, and as of Thursday evening, the Lira is trading at an all-time low of nearly 20 Lira per US dollar. To make matters worse, the Lira is trading at even less than that in Turkey's Grand Bazaar, and most analysts think that the Lira has a fair bit further to go. The cost of hedging against further declines hit a new high in April, which suggests the markets expect further falls, and both JP Morgan and the Bank of America have said they expect the Lira to fall to about 25 Lira per dollar after the election. So what's going on? Why is the Lira continuing its decline, and why do markets think that things are only going to get worse? Well, as we see it, there are 4 reasons. First, the earthquake. The earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria earlier this year was truly devastating. It caused tens of thousands of deaths, displaced over 1 million people, and the UN estimates that the damage will exceed $100 billion in cost, over 10% of Turkey's GDP. Obviously, financing the recovery requires spending more liras, and more liras mean a wider current account deficit and a weaker Lira. Second, Erdogan's economic policies. As well as insisting that he'll continue to cut rates if he's re-elected, to keep people happy ahead of the election, Erdogan has announced a series of enormous spending packages. He's raised the minimum wage 3 times in the past 18 months, which is now about 3 times as high as it was in 2021, and promised another hike in July if he wins. He's also increased gas and electricity subsidies, and on Tuesday, less than a week before the elections, he announced a 45% pay rise for Turkey's 700,000 or so civil servants. While these policies might make for good headlines, ultimately they'll just make inflation worse, and this has only accelerated investors' flight from the Lira. Third, the fact that the central bank's policies are clearly unsustainable. Because the central bank is loyal to Erdogan, for the last few months they've been trying to keep the value of the Lira up to make sure inflation stays steady. They've tried everything, intervening in currency markets, promising to guarantee the dollar value of Lira deposits, even offering gold instead of dollars to anyone trying to sell the Lira. While these policies might work in the short term, the central bank is literally running out of foreign currency and gold to keep the Lira afloat, to the extent that Erdogan has had to beg the Saudis for extra cash. Anyway, markets know that Turkey can't afford to support the Lira forever, which is why they're pricing in a further decline. Fourth and finally, political risk. As we've explained in one of our recent Turkey videos, there's a non-trivial chance that, if Erdogan refuses to step down, Sunday's election ends in a constitutional crisis. And this political risk is putting investors off the Lira. Even if Kılıçdaroğlu wins, he's going to have an uphill battle sorting out Turkey's economy. Kılıçdaroğlu has said that he wants a return to economic orthodoxy, but that's easier said than done. Bank of America, for example, thinks interest rates would have to go as high as 50%. Yeah, 50%, to balance out Turkey's current account, which would have disastrous economic consequences in the short term. So what does this mean for the election? Well, while it's not good news for Erdogan that he's presided over yet another decline in the Lira, and it'll further undermine his damaged reputation for economic management, it probably won't make a massive difference to the headline voting figures. Erdogan has already established himself as economically illiterate. A further 5% slide in the Lira isn't going to change many voters' minds. Perhaps more significant for the election is the news that Muharrem İnce, the third candidate in the presidential election, has pulled out of the race just 3 days before the election. İnce represents the Homeland Party, but used to be a member of the CHP, the same party that Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu currently leads. Turkey's state media, which is basically controlled by Erdogan, was promoting his candidacy ahead of the election, presumably because Erdogan wants to use İnce to split the opposition vote and deny Kılıçdaroğlu the 50% majority he'd need to win in the first round. The fact that he's pulled out bodes really well for Kılıçdaroğlu, who could now win outright in the first round. What do the world's best politicians have in common? They're willing to learn something new every day. And if you think that sounds too hard or too time-consuming, or even just too overwhelming for you to do, then you haven't tried Brilliant.org. Brilliant.org is the best way to learn maths and computer science in a fun and interactive way. That's because Brilliant has literally thousands of lessons, from foundational and advanced maths to skills crucial in the modern world, like AI, data science, neural networks, and more, with new lessons added monthly. Like I said though, the real value here is that you can do this easily every day, truly committing to lifelong learning. Slowly, over time, you'll not only pick up new skills or get better at maths, but you'll also feel the satisfaction that comes with bettering yourself and staying ahead. To try everything Brilliant has to offer, free for a full 30 days, click on the link in the description. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription.